Do you ever feel like the world today is strangely hollow? We have everything glowing, electric lights, global connection at the tap of a screen, food in the fridge, music in our ears, an entire universe compressed into the palm of our hands. And yet, we feel empty. You wake up, go to work, talk, smile, but deep down, something's not right, as if you're living a life no one truly sees. No one touches the deepest part of you, not even yourself. And then in rare quiet moments when the notifications stop, when the world fades, a question begins to echo. What is all this? Really, for you're not weak, you're not pessimistic, you're awakening. More than a century ago, Friedrich Nietzsche wrote a sentence that shook humanity to its core. God is dead. This was not an insult, not a rebellious slogan. It was a warning, profound, serious, and painful. Nietzsche wasn't talking about a specific God. He was talking about the death of absolute meaning, the collapse of the timeless values that once held humanity steady amidst chaos, the death of the belief that someone somewhere had already written a perfect script for your life. And when those values crumble, you feel it, not with your mind, but with a trembling inside your soul, disorientation, loss of motivation, a sense of being unanchored in a world that looks complete but feels hollow. We live in an age where God is dead and nothing has replaced him. And so we are left with the void. But that void is also an opportunity. In this video, we'll walk the path Nietzsche laid out, from the death of old beliefs to the pain of being lost. And finally, if you are brave enough, to the rebirth of a completely new self. This is not a lecture. This is a call to stop pretending that everything is fine and begin crafting your own meaning. Because after God is dead, only you remain. Very few people dare to admit this. We are living without truly knowing why. Since childhood, we were taught to believe in a pre-written path. Study hard, find a stable job, get married, buy a house, have children. And if you did it right, you were promised a reward, happiness, meaning fulfillment. But one day, often on an ordinary evening, you suddenly look back and realize you did everything right. And it still feels wrong. Success didn't fill the void. Relationships didn't cure the loneliness. That feeling of living someone else's life becomes louder. Why Nietzsche had an answer. When he said God is dead, he wasn't just referring to religion. He was speaking of the death of a collective system of meaning. Where humans once found guidance in the past, God or any absolute belief stood at the center of our spiritual universe. All notions of good and evil, high and low, sacred and profane, revolved around that divine reference point. But modernity shattered it. Science replaced theology, markets replaced faith, technology replaced rituals. We no longer have unshakable moral foundations, no ready-made meanings, and worse, we pretend everything is fine. You post inspirational quotes but don't know who you're really inspiring, even yourself. You talk about life goals, but if someone asks why they matter, you can't answer. You smile in photos, but when the camera turns off, your eyes go blank. This is the spiritual crisis Nietzsche foresaw. He called it nihilism, the condition in which all values that once gave life meaning lose their value, and you feel it not in books, you feel it in life itself. When you reach a big goal and still feel empty, when you're surrounded by people and feel utterly alone, when you get what you once longed for and nothing inside changes. The death of God is not an event, it's a silent process, a candle slowly burning out. While the world pretends the altar still glows, we no longer believe in the old values, but we haven't created anything new. So we're stuck. We live in a world without a map, still behaving like we're following a clear path. That's the deep fatigue you can't quite name. It's not lack of motivation, it's lack of direction. Nietzsche saw this long before anyone else, and he didn't offer an easy solution. He offered something more vital. He named the pain that an entire generation hadn't yet learned to name. But this video doesn't end at diagnosis. In the next part, we'll go deeper into nihilism. Not only the description of the void, but also Nietzsche's vision of how to walk through it. Because if God is dead and no one else is writing the script for you, then maybe it's time you picked up the pen. Imagine yourself standing at the edge of a cliff. Below is darkness, no path, no map, no voice from above telling you what to do. To nihilism, the abyss Nietzsche named over a century ago. And today it's no longer just a philosophical concept. It's the lived reality of millions. Nihilism happens when everything that once had meaning collapses. The values you trusted, the goals you chased, the promises society gave you, all suddenly feel empty. You still go to work, you still smile, you still live, but deep inside a quiet question gnaws at you. Why am I doing any of this? Nietzsche called this state passive nihilism, when a person no longer believes in anything, yet lacks the strength to create something new. It's when you sit in a crowd but feel invisible, when you laugh on the outside but are hollow inside, when you stare at a screen hoping someone will say something that gives you a reason to keep going. But there's no one, no divine voice, no cosmic blueprint to lean on, only you and the abyss. That's what makes nihilism so dangerous. Not because it kills hope instantly, but because it erodes you silently, day by day, night by night, behind every forced smile. You don't collapse in one dramatic moment. You slowly dissolve from within. And the scariest part, no one notices. In the modern world, nihilism wears many disguises. A tiredness you can't explain. A feeling of being lost in a life that looks complete. Conversations that stay on the surface because no one dares to touch what's real inside. Nietzsche knew this well, not just intellectually, but through his own life, illness, isolation, misunderstanding, spiritual disorientation. But instead of running away, he did something extraordinary. He stared into the abyss because he believed that despair was not the end. It was the beginning of rebirth, but only for those who were brave enough not to turn away. The problem is, most people stop in the middle. They feel the emptiness and immediately rush to fill it with external things. Shopping, food, entertainment, photos, posts, likes. They don't cross the abyss. They avoid it, but Nietzsche was different. He believed that only if you stay long enough in the darkness will you begin to see a real light. That's why nihilism isn't the end. It's a rite of transformation. It's the fire that burns away everything that is no longer truly you, so that something authentic can rise from the ashes. But make no mistake, there is a price to pay. You will lose the illusions that once made life easier. You will have nights filled with the question, who am I? If I am no longer these roles I've been playing, you will face the terrifying truth. No one is coming to save you, but right there in that moment, something miraculous can happen. You begin to realize meaning is not something given. It is something you must create from the shards of your former self. This is the second turning point Nietzsche offers. Active nihilism, when you stop looking for meaning outside and begin to build it from within. Nietzsche didn't want you to die in the abyss. He wanted you to cross it. To do that, you don't need blind faith. You need something else entirely. The courage to live truthfully even without any guarantees. And that is the subject of the next chapter. How to cross the abyss and rebuild your life from the ashes of dead meaning. When everything collapses, when you've reached the bottom and there's nothing left to cling to. That's when a truly important question arises. If no one is left to tell you who you are, who will you choose to become? This is where Nietzsche introduces a new idea. No longer a believer in a handed-down truth, but a creator of value. Not someone who repeats old scripts, but someone who writes their own story, because Nietzsche understood one thing. Meaning is not something you find in the world. It's not lying in a book, a sermon, or a religion. Meaning is something you must create. Like an artist standing before a blank canvas, you are not given a pattern to copy. You are given freedom, emptiness, and absolute responsibility. And that emptiness is the very ground from which rebirth begins. Rebirth is not returning, it is beginning true. Rebirth is not going back to how things were, it is becoming someone you have never been before. Not built on social expectations, not copied from anyone else, not lived to please others. You build a new self from your pain, your questions, your losses, and the first thing you need is not a master plan, but a single honest act. A no you were once afraid to say, a yes you've always delayed, a decision no one agrees with, but you know it's true. Nietzsche called this the will to power. Not the power to dominate others, but the power to build your life from chaos itself. A new seed only sprouts when the old soil has been burned away. You cannot build something new while clinging to the fragments of the old. An identity that no longer fits. A role you've grown tired of. A life scripted by someone else. True creation requires destruction. Nietzsche once wrote, "The creator must be willing to burn in his own flame so that his light may illuminate the path for others." And it all begins with one thing, courage. The courage to live without needing applause. The courage to walk paths no one has walked before. The courage to say, I don't know who I am, but I'm willing to find out. True freedom is not the absence of limits, but the ability to choose meaningful ones. In a world after the death of God, everything seems empty. No right, no wrong, no guiding light, and that is terrifying. But Nietzsche doesn't stop at fear. He asks a deeper question. If everything is meaningless, then what will you choose to give meaning to? That question shifts you from a victim of chaos to a creator within it. You are no longer just reacting to a collapsing world. You are choosing what is worth living for, sacrificing for building upon. That might be. Art is a way to touch truth beyond words. Sincerity, living honestly in a world of masks. Service not for morality points, but because it makes you feel alive. There's no formula. Only one essential law. Whatever makes you willing to endure suffering, that is your meaning. And finally, the one who crosses the abyss becomes themselves. Nietzsche called this figure the Übermensch, the Overman, the transcendent human. But don't misunderstand. This is not someone who dominates others, not someone who succeeds by societal standards. It is someone who has seen the void and not despaired, has passed through nihilism without retreating into illusions, has lost all hand-me-down beliefs and forged themselves anew. This is the mark of true maturity. No longer a child obeying the commandments of heaven, but an artist sculpting their own soul. When the old values collapse and you are forced to rewrite your entire life, Nietzsche doesn't leave you wandering in the dark. He offers a daring path, not to return to old systems, not to cling to new illusions, but to evolve into a new kind of human. The Übermensch is not stronger, but deeper. Many have misread this idea. They think Nietzsche was speaking of a Superman, a conqueror, someone better than others. But no, the Übermensch does not rise above others. He rises above himself, above fear, above spiritual laziness, above the need for approval and acceptance. This is a person who no longer lives by borrowed values, but creates their own. Even with no guarantee, no heaven, no applause, to surpass resistance and become a creator. Nietzsche once described the spirit's journey in 3 transformations. 1, the camel who carries all the burdens of tradition, duties, beliefs, social rules. This is you when you live by the shoulds, when you carry what others say is right. The lion who rebels, breaks chains, says no. This is you when you awaken, when you begin to question, when you no longer accept because that's how it's always been. The child, the symbol of pure creation. This is you when the rebellion has burned away, when you are no longer driven by anger or reaction, but by freedom, by innocence, by play. The Übermensch is the child born from the ashes of the old world, without bitterness, without a need to prove anything, just free from within, the one who doesn't just react, but creates. In today's world, we are mostly just reacting to pressure, reacting to fear, reacting to expectations we never agreed to. But someone who only reacts is not truly free. Nietzsche said, true freedom is not doing whatever you want. It is creating your own law and living it with your whole heart. You don't need to destroy everything. You need to build something worthy to replace it. Only the one who turns tragedy into art is truly alive. Nietzsche believed the Übermensch is not a warrior or a saint, but an artist of destiny. He doesn't run from suffering. He transforms it into creative force. He doesn't wait for a miracle. He makes the miracle out of contradiction, out of pain, out of life's raw materials. Some people lose something and live forever in regret, but the one who transcends turns that loss into poetry, into music, into a vibrant, living expression. That's why Nietzsche said, one must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. If you are in chaos, don't rush to extinguish it. Learn to listen to it, transform it, make it your art of living. Not living well, but living truthfully. The world tells you to be good, be proper, be normal. Nietzsche didn't care about being good. He cared about being real. You can be good and feel empty. You can be right and be fully conditioned. You can be successful and still have no idea who you are. For Nietzsche, there is only one true achievement in life, to become yourself. But to do that, you must accept the risk of being misunderstood, the risk of being criticized, the risk of being alone. Because only when you live truthfully, even if rejected, are you truly living your own life, not someone else's copy. If you've reached the bottom of nihilism, if you've stared into the abyss and didn't turn back, if you've accepted that no one is coming to save you, then here's the final truth. You don't need to be saved. You need to be born again, but this time not from your mother, but from your spirit, your will, your fearless heart. Nietzsche didn't want to teach you how to live. He wanted you to become someone that not even he could imagine. You've walked through the death of old values. You've looked into the void and didn't turn back. You've understood that meaning is not found, it is made. And now when all easy beliefs have crumbled, only one question remains the biggest question of your life. If there is no longer a God to write your script, what will you write? This question isn't for philosophers alone. It's for everyone living in this modern world. A world full of noise but empty of meaning. A world where everything is connected, yet people are more disconnected from themselves than ever. And you, if you've listened this far, maybe you no longer want to live a shallow life. Maybe you're done chasing standard goals with society's seal of success, because you've begun to see something deeper. True freedom is not easy, but it's the only gift worth having. The death of God is not a tragedy. It is our final chance to grow up with no one left to command you. No one left to promise you heaven. You are handed back your full power. No one draws the path. No one takes responsibility for you. Absolute freedom, absolute responsibility. You are no longer the child kneeling at the altar. You are the artist carving your own soul. The world is waiting to see what you will create. So ask yourself, if you could define happiness for yourself, what would it be? If you could erase every should, what would you keep? If you had nothing left to prove, how would you live? We often think that creativity belongs only to artists. But the truth is, everyone who lives truthfully is an artist. You can create a simple, honest life, a deep, meaningful relationship, a kind act that carries your soul, a piece of work that reflects your spirit. It doesn't need to be perfect, it just needs to be real. Because as Nietzsche once said, there are no absolute truths, only perspectives deep enough to change your life. If you've reached the end of this, you're probably not the kind of person satisfied with shallow answers. You're someone who wants to understand themselves, to touch the deepest part of your own existence, even if it means loneliness, doubt, and uncertainty. Nietzsche didn't want to comfort you. He didn't want you to be fine. He wanted you to awaken. No one is coming to rescue you because you don't need rescue. You need to be born in a way only you can create. And to do that, you must become the one who walks through doubt, through pain, and rises from the ashes. That is when you stop repeating someone else's life and start living your own. Thanks for watching.